What makes a good match?
I'm married, so I'm dying to learn.
Well, we get that question a lot as matchmakers, and they say, okay, your title is matchmaker. How do you know? How did you learn that? And it's not the easiest thing. It's an art and a science, and no one is correct 100% of the time. It's just not possible. But what we find is there is definitely a combination of what people say they want and what we know has worked in the past.
What people want and then what's good for them. They may not entirely line up.
Exactly. So a lot of what we do is work with people to figure out what it is they really want. Mm-hmm. So a woman might come to us with a list of 40 things and say, I want a man who has good teeth and makes this amount of money and lives in this part of town. And what we do is work with them to figure out, okay, what do those things mean and why? And those are the elements that we put into a match in the long run. That, you know, it's really all about long-term compatibility and personality and values and what do you want out of life. So those are things that matter more so than that long list.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the flaws of how people date online. I wouldn't even say it's the medium itself. The medium is just a box filled with people. It's what the people do with the medium that really determines it. But the characteristics that make for good matches are not evident in online dating profiles. People think online dating profiles are, I'm nice, smart, kind, warm, funny, honest, successful, ambitious, family-oriented. I like hiking, biking, movies, music, travel, right? And it's not about a list of adjectives that anybody could say, right? Whether they have any weight or currency is debatable, right? Or the list of things that you have in common, because similarly, two people don't stay together for 50 years because they both like tennis, right? If they can't get along. And so I gave dating advice for 6 years when I was single, and I've been giving advice for 6 years now that I'm married. And so I'm almost embarrassed to say that I'm much better at my job now than I was when I started. And my wife sort of became like my North Star. I was like, oh, this is what works. This is what a successful relationship feels like.
I agree that people who have experienced long-term relationships, marriage or otherwise, know a little bit more about what matters down the line. So a lot of the people we'll work with who've never, they've been in a 2-month or 3-month relationship, they're the ones that are focused on what someone looks like or, what their GPA in college was, what college they went to. I think when you've been in a long-term relationship, you realize none of that matters.
None of it.
And so those are the people, and that's why I encourage people date, be in relationships that might not end in marriage. That's okay too.
And challenge yourself because there's going to be an exception to every made-up rule in your head. I was once upon a time a college snob, and then I met a whole bunch of people who didn't even go to college, and they were as smart as I was. I was like, why am I holding on to this prestige college thing? It's kind of irrelevant. You got to judge individuals on their individual merits, and it's just never going to look what you like. Andrea Sirtash, Syrtash, wrote a really good book called He's Just Not Your Type, or something like that. And I think she does a really good job of explaining how when you sort of play on the margins and you challenge yourself to open up. My wife compromised. My wife's Catholic and I'm Jewish. She's 3 years older than I am. I was not looking for someone who's older than I am, and it all works itself out. It's all sort of negotiable because the relationship itself becomes bigger than the couple. The list of credentials and the must-haves kind of all goes away, and you're left with, when you're where I am in the suburbs with 2 kids, how well do you get along on a day-to-day basis? How do you make 100 little decisions a day and not kill each other? And having people who are fundamentally givers and compromisers and pleasers is really a key. And you could find the guy who has everything on paper or the woman who has everything on paper and have a miserable relationship, and everybody knows it. But we are so driven by our attraction. And our attraction allows us to forgive and sweep all these terrible behaviors and incompatibilities under the rug because it's inconvenient to say, yeah, this relationship isn't working. Everybody's had that experience. The difference is some people continue to bang their head against that wall and think, I'm going to keep on chasing the same person, but this time I'm going to get a different result. Instead of, hey, maybe I'm just going to pivot 20 degrees to the left and find find happiness.
And I think the evidence for that is if you go talk to 5 or 10 of your friends who are married, they will all tell you that it didn't come in the package that they expected it to. So I think that's one way that we get people to be more open-minded, is to show, here are all of the success stories we have with people who didn't fit into those boxes.
Yeah, chemistry is usually the thing, and you need, and that's why I don't want to be misunderstood, you need some modicum of chemistry to start any relationship, right? You should never have to pretend to be attracted or force yourself to be attracted. If you're on a date with someone, you're like, I would need 17 beers to make this happen. You don't go on a second date, and you're not wrong for that. We're saying that if you start with a 6 chemistry, you could, by the 3rd date, have an 8 chemistry quite easily. Happens all the time, and you have to be open to that. But you should never have to force something where there's nothing. And I think that's where people get a little pushed back against what we're talking about, is because it's like you're telling them to settle, and that's not a word that anybody's uttering, but that's what people hear when you talk about opening up your boundaries just a little bit.
Exactly.
The difference between settling and compromising is really important. Settling is when you make a trade-off and you're not happy with your trade-off. Compromising is when you make a trade-off and you're happy with your trade-off.
You're more happy.
Exactly. You compromise your way into happiness. You settle into misery. So no one is ever telling you to do anything that doesn't make you happy. It's just trying different things on for size and seeing how they fit, instead of assuming, oh, I don't like it, it doesn't fit, without ever having tried it on.